On the most exclusive night of the New York social calendar, one man held the power to make or break a reputation with a single glance. Jocelyn Ashworth, the billionaire titan of industry, was the host of the Starlight Gala, an event dripping with wealth and ambition. Yet for 5 years since the death of his beloved wife, he had built a wall of ice around his heart. He refused to speak, refused to smile, and most famously, he refused to dance. The world watched, wondering what it would take to thaw the frozen king. They never imagined the answer would walk in, not in a couture gown, but in a simple maid's uniform, holding the hand of a little girl who carried a secret powerful enough to shatter everything. The air in the grand ballroom of the Ashworth estate was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, a fragrant cloud that failed to mask the palpable tension. It was the 5th annual Starlight Gala for pediatric research, the philanthropic jewel in the crown of Ashworth Industries. To the outside world, it was a night of staggering generosity. To the attendees, it was a competitive sport. The prize wasn't the silent auction's Fabergé egg or the weekend getaway on a private island. It was a single dance with the host, Jocelyn Ashworth, a prize no one had ever won. Jocelyn sat in his custom-made armchair, positioned on a discreet dais that gave him a perfect, unobstructed view of the festivities. It was less a seat of honor and more a throne of self-imposed exile. At 42, he was devastatingly handsome, with sharp patrician features, hair the color of dark sable, just beginning to dust with silver at the temples, and eyes the color of a stormy North Atlantic sea. Those eyes, once spoken of in gossip columns for their warmth and humor, were now his most formidable weapons. They were flat dismissive and utterly devoid of light. He watched the couples twirl on the marble floor, below a sea of silk, satin, and diamonds, moving to the gentle sway of a live orchestra. Each note felt like a tiny shard of glass in his memory. This was their music. This was their ballroom. Every polished surface reflected the ghost of her laughter. Every swirl of a gown mimicked the way Eleanor used to move. Mr. Ashworth. A hopeful voice cut through his reverie. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Delilah Carmichael, daughter of a shipping magnate, her dress probably costing more than the average person's yearly salary. She was the 4th woman to try tonight. He slowly lifted his gaze. He didn't speak. He simply met her eyes and held them for 3 long, excruciating seconds. In that silence, he communicated everything: his disinterest, his annoyance at her presumption, his unassailable grief. A blush crept up Delilah's neck. She stammered a quiet apology and practically fled back into the crowd. A ripple of whispers followed her retreat. "He hasn't changed one," Dowager muttered to another behind her fan. Still in mourning. So romantic, but so tragic. Tragic for the balance sheet of any family trying to merge with him. Her companion replied cynically. "The man is a fortress. Jocelyn heard them. He heard everything. The whispers were the background noise of his life. He didn't care. Let them talk. Let them call him the frozen king, the mourning millionaire, the hermit of 5th Avenue. It was all true. The part of him that knew how to connect, to feel, to dance, had been buried with Eleanor 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. He had made a silent vow at her graveside. His feet would never again move to music, for his only partner was gone. Miles away from the glittering facade of the Upper East Side, in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, Leilani Jenkins was tying the laces on her daughter's tiny sneakers. "Okay, little bug. Are you ready for our adventure?" she asked, her voice, a soft, reassuring hum. 5-year-old Lily nodded, her bright, intelligent eyes wide with excitement. They were eyes that held a universe of curiosity, a deep, startling shade of grey-blue that seemed to drink in the world. Her hair was a cascade of tight, dark curls, framing a face that was a perfect blend of determination and innocence. "We get to see the big castle." "Mommy, we do, Leilani," confirmed a weary but genuine smile touching her lips. "But remember the rules. You stay in the little room I show you, you play with your tablet, and you are as quiet as a little mouse. The people there, they're not used to little girls running around." "Because they're fancy?" Lily asked. Leilani's smile tightened. "Yes, baby, because they're fancy." Leilani Jenkins was not supposed to be here. A year ago, she was Dr. Leilani Williams, a respected sociologist with a promising academic career and a loving husband. Then, in the space of a single, screeching tire heartbeat, it was all gone. A hit-and-run driver had stolen her husband, David, and a mountain of unexpected debt had stolen the rest. The official story was that David, a financial analyst, had made some bad secret investments. Leilani never fully believed it, but grief and survival were more pressing than suspicion. She had been forced to sell their home, liquidate their assets, and disappear into the anonymity of the working class. She changed her name to Jenkins, her mother's maiden name, and took whatever work she could find, all to protect the one precious thing she had left Lily. The job at the Ashworth estate was a godsend and a curse. It paid better than any other domestic position, allowing her to keep their apartment. But the head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, was a woman carved from granite, a stickler for rules who despised exceptions. Tonight was the gala, an all-hands-on-deck event. When Leilani's babysitter had cancelled at the last minute with a stomach flu, desperation had set in. Begging Mrs. Gable to let her bring Lily and tuck her away in a staff locker room felt like swallowing shards of glass. But she'd done it. The housekeeper had agreed with a glare that promised retribution if so much as a whisper was heard from the child. Arriving at the estate through the service entrance was like stepping into another dimension. Even the back corridors, all sterile white and polished steel, hummed with an energy of immense wealth. Leilani settled Lily into a small, windowless break room with a bag of snacks, her tablet, and a colouring book. "I'll be back to check on you as soon as I can, my love." "Be good for Mommy. I will," Lily promised, already absorbed in her game. Leilani's duties for the evening were simple, but endless, circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres, clearing abandoned glasses, and remaining invisible. She moved through the throngs of laughing, preening guests with practiced efficiency. She saw the women approach Jocelyn Ashworth's lonely throne. She saw their retreat. She saw the cold, impenetrable mask he wore. To her, he wasn't a tragic, romantic figure. He was just another man for whom the world bent a man so insulated by his wealth he could afford to nurse his pain in public, turning it into a spectacle. Her own grief had to be swallowed daily, a bitter pill taken in the privacy of her small apartment after her daughter was asleep. Hours passed. The orchestra shifted from lively waltzes to slower, more intimate melodies. Leilani's feet ached, her professional smile plastered on her face. During a brief lull, she slipped away to check on Lily. She opened the door to the break room and her heart stopped. It was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She scanned the room, the half-eaten bag of chips, the colouring book left open on a drawing of a lopsided princess. Lily was gone. "Lily," she whispered, her voice trembling. She darted out her mind, racing. Where could a 5-year-old go? The kitchens? The laundry? No, the music. Children were always drawn to music. Oh God, no. Her heart pounding against her ribs, she moved against the flow of servants in the corridor, heading towards the faint melodic strains emanating from the ballroom. She pushed open the heavy, soundproofed service door, just a crack, praying she was wrong. And there she was. Standing just inside the grand archway of the main entrance, partially hidden by a colossal marble pillar, was her daughter. Lily wasn't crying or scared. She was utterly mesmerized, her small body swaying gently to the music. Her head was tilted, and she was humming. It was a simple, haunting little tune, one Leilani often hummed to her at bedtime, without thinking a melody she'd pieced together from memory, something she thought she'd made up. At that exact moment, Jocelyn Ashworth was performing his ritual rejection. The woman this time was Cassandra van der Groot, an heiress with a lineage tracing back to the Mayflower. She stood before him, the picture of grace and breeding. He gave his customary silent dismissal. But as she turned away and the crowd's whispers began anew, his head snapped to the side. His focus wasn't on Cassandra. It was on the grand archway, over the lush sounds of the string quartet. He heard it. Faint, ethereal, but unmistakable. A melody that no one, absolutely no one, should know. It was Eleanor's lullaby, a tune he had composed himself for his wife on a quiet evening in this very house. He had never written it down. He had never recorded it. It had existed only in the space between the two of them, a secret symphony of their love. His gaze followed the sound, past the gawking socialites, past the marble pillars, until it landed on the source. A small, dark, curled child lost in the music. And then he saw the woman, her face, a mask of pure terror, rushing out from the shadows of a service corridor to grab her. The world seemed to slow down. The air grew thick and heavy in Jocelyn's lungs. He saw the woman, one of the maids, her uniform, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns surrounding her. He saw her panic. But mostly he saw the child. He saw the impossible heart-stopping familiarity in her wide grey-blue eyes as she turned her head towards him. They were Eleanor's eyes. For the first time in 5 years, Jocelyn Ashworth rose from his chair. He didn't stride. He didn't walk. He moved with a purpose that silenced the entire room. The orchestra faltered one instrument after another, falling quiet until only a single confused cello note hung in the air before it, too, died. 150 of New York's elite watched in stunned silence as the billionaire, the frozen king, descended from his dais. He walked past Cassandra van der Groot without a glance. He walked past the richest and most powerful people in the city. He walked straight towards the service entrance, where a terrified maid was trying to pull her daughter back into the shadows. Leilani's blood ran cold. He was coming for them. She was going to be fired, thrown out, blacklisted. She pulled on Lily's arm, whispering frantically, "Come on, baby, we have to go." But Lily was frozen, her gaze locked, with the tall, imposing man approaching them. Jocelyn stopped a few feet away. His stormy eyes weren't angry. They were filled with a raw, bewildered emotion Leilani had never seen before. He looked from Lily to Leilani, then back to Lily. His voice, when it finally came, was rough, rusty from disuse. "What is that song?" he asked, his question directed at the child. Lily just stared, suddenly shy. He looked at Leilani. The question was now a demand, sharp and desperate. The song she was humming. Where did she learn it? Leilani's mind was a blank wall of panic. I don't know what you mean. It's just a nursery rhyme. I made it up." A muscle twitched in Jocelyn's jaw. "No," he said, his voice low and absolute. "You didn't." He looked down at the marble floor, then back at Leilani. The entire ballroom held its breath. They expected an explosion, a dismissal, a scene. They were not prepared for what came next. Jocelyn Ashworth, the man who had refused duchesses and billionaires' daughters extended a hand. Not to the child, but to the maid. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, laced with a terrifying, desperate need for an answer he couldn't articulate. Leilani stared at his outstretched hand as if it were a serpent. "What? No. I can't. I'm working. Dance with me," he repeated, his voice dropping even lower, an order that allowed no refusal. Now, her heart hammering against her ribs, trapped by the weight of 150 pairs of eyes, and the sheer, unyielding force of his will. Leilani Jenkins looked from his hand to his haunted face. She had no choice. Slowly, her trembling hand still loosely holding her daughter's, she placed her fingers in his. His grip was like steel. He led her to the center of the silent dance floor, pulling her into a formal waltz position. He nodded curtly to the orchestra leader. "Play." The conductor flustered, tapped his baton, and the music started again, soft and tentative. And as Jocelyn Ashworth began to move, pulling the terrified uniformed maid with him, the ghost of Eleanor was not the only secret swirling in the gilded ballroom. There was a new one, a living one, standing by a pillar, watching her mother with wide, grey-blue eyes. The dance was a surreal nightmare. Leilani felt like a moth pinned to a board, exposed under the glare of the chandeliers and the even more intense glare of the high society guests. Every eye in the room was on them, a mixture of shock, derision, and rabid curiosity. She could feel their judgment like a physical force. The maid. He was dancing with the maid. Jocelyn's hand was firm on the small of her back, his other hand holding hers in a grip that was less romantic and more like an arrest. He moved with a practiced automatic grace that his body remembered even if his soul had forgotten. Leilani, clumsy with fear and cheap rubber-soled shoes, stumbled. He held her steady without a word, his focus absolute. He wasn't looking at her face. His gaze was distant, turned inward, as if he were dancing with a memory. The proximity was suffocating. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his expensive cologne, feel the warmth of his body through her thin polyester uniform. It was an intimacy so profound and so public that it made her skin crawl. The song, he said again, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Tell me the truth." "I told you," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "It's nothing. A tune I hum to her. That's impossible." His grip tightened almost painfully. "Who are you?" "My name is Leilani Jenkins. I'm a member of your staff, Mr. Ashworth, and I'm going to be fired for this." He finally looked at her, then his stormy eyes locking onto hers. For a split second, she saw past the cold mask to the desperate, frantic man beneath. He was drowning, and he seemed to think she was a life raft. "You won't be fired," he stated a simple fact. "You will tell me where you learned that melody." The music ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the music had been. They stood frozen in the center of the floor for a heartbeat before Jocelyn released her. He didn't thank her for the dance. He simply turned and walked not back to his throne, but towards the grand staircase, his stride long and purposeful. He paused at the bottom step and looked back, not at the crowd, but directly at Leilani. "My study. In 5 minutes." Then his gaze shifted to Lily, who was now clinging to Leilani's leg. "Bring the girl." He ascended the stairs without a backward glance, leaving a maelstrom of confusion in his wake. As if a spell had been broken, the room erupted in a cacophony of frantic whispers. Leilani felt 100 pairs of eyes dissecting her. She scooped Lily into her arms, her only thought to flee. But Mrs. Gable was already bearing down on her, her face a thundercloud of fury. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? Jenkins, the housekeeper, hissed her voice low and venomous. "You have made a mockery of this entire event of Mr. Ashworth." "He asked me," Leilani stammered, holding Lily tighter. "I didn't have a choice. You will pack your things and be out of this house before the sun rises." "No, she won't." The voice was cool and clipped, dripping with authority. A woman had appeared beside Mrs. Gable, impeccably dressed in a deep emerald gown that highlighted her fiery red hair and pale skin. She was sharp, angular, and carried an air of proprietary control. Leilani recognized her from staff photos, Beatrice Vance, Eleanor Ashworth's younger sister, and the director of the Ashworth Foundation. Beatrice's cold green eyes swept over Leilani and Lily with undisguised contempt. Jocelyn asked for her in his study. "You will take her there, Mrs. Gable." Immediately. Mrs. Gable looked shocked, but nodded curtly. "Yes, Mrs. Vance." Beatrice gave Leilani one last lingering look, a clear warning that this was a battlefield she had just stumbled onto, and she was on the wrong side. The walk to the study was a walk of shame. Mrs. Gable led the way, her back ramrod straight. The study was on the second floor in the family's private wing, a place no junior staff member was ever supposed to enter. It was a world away from the ballroom's glitter. Dark mahogany shelves filled with leather-bound books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A massive fireplace, unlit, dominated one wall, and in the center of it all, standing by a large, ornate desk, was Jocelyn Ashworth. He had shed his tuxedo jacket and undone his bow tie, a small sign of the composure he was rapidly losing. Mrs. Gable announced their presence with a stiff "sir," and then retreated, closing the heavy oak doors behind her with a definitive click. The sound echoed in the silent room, sealing them in. "Sit," Jocelyn commanded, gesturing to two plush leather chairs in front of his desk. Leilani perched on the very edge of one, placing Lily on her lap. The little girl seemed to sense the immense tension burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Jocelyn leaned against the desk, his arms crossed. The false calm from the ballroom was gone. His face was a raw canvas of turmoil. "Let's try this again. My name is Jocelyn Ashworth, and you are Leilani Jenkins." And that he said, nodding towards Lily, "Is your daughter?" "Yes." "Lily." "Lily." He repeated the name, tasting it. It seemed to cause him a fresh wave of pain. He ran a hand through his dark hair. Lily was humming a song I wrote for my wife, Eleanor, a song no one else has ever heard. I want to know how, and I want the truth this time, not a story about a made-up nursery rhyme. Leilani's mind was racing. The truth was impossible. She had made it up, hadn't she? It was just a collection of notes that felt comforting. But his certainty, his visceral reaction, it was terrifying. She had to protect herself, protect Lily. Anonymity was her only shield. "Mr. Ashworth, I'm sorry for whatever distress this has caused. My daughter, she picks things up. Maybe she overheard it somewhere. A television show, the radio." "No." He cut her off, his voice dangerously low. "It has never been played on any show on any radio station. It has never been performed publicly. It existed only for my wife." He pushed himself off the desk and began to pace a caged tiger in his own opulent prison. 5 years ago, my wife died. She was the only person in the world who knew that tune. So for her melody to come from the mouth of your child, you must understand my position. He stopped in front of her, leaning down, his face close to hers. "I am a man with considerable resources, Miss Jenkins. I can find out anything I want to know about anyone. I am asking you as a courtesy to tell me yourself. Who sent you here? Was it a reporter? A rival? What do you want, money?" The accusations stung, cutting through her fear and igniting a spark of anger. I am a maid, Mr. Ashworth. I want to be paid for my work so I can feed my child and pay my rent. I wasn't sent by anyone. My daughter wandered off and I made a mistake. That's all." Her defiance seemed to surprise him. He straightened up, studying her with new intensity. He looked at Lily, who peeked out from Leilani's shoulder, her big grey-blue eyes, watching him with unwavering curiosity. His own eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "She has her mother's eyes. I assume." Leilani froze. It was an innocent question, but it landed like a stone in her stomach. Lily's eyes were nothing like hers. Leilani's were a warm, deep brown. Lily's eyes, they were a perfect match for the stormy grey-blue orbs currently staring at her with unnerving focus. They were David's eyes, or so she had always told herself. She takes after her father. Leilani said, her voice strained. Her father Jocelyn repeated, "And where is he?" "He passed away," she said quietly. The lie was so practiced, it felt like truth, but tonight, under his scrutiny, it felt flimsy, transparent. A heavy silence descended upon the room. Jocelyn seemed to be wrestling with 1,000 different thoughts. He looked from Leilani's resolute, frightened face to Lily's innocent one. The anger in his expression was slowly being replaced by a profound, aching confusion. "Mrs. Vance, my sister-in-law, thinks you are an opportunist," he said suddenly. "She believes this was a calculated performance, that you somehow researched my wife, found this detail, and used your child as a prop to get my attention." Leilani's jaw dropped. "That's insane. That's monstrous." "Is it?" Jocelyn challenged. "The world is full of monstrous people, Miss Jenkins. People who will do anything for money or power." He let out a long, weary sigh. "But your fear, it seems genuine. And your daughter?" He trailed off, his gaze fixed on Lily. "What is her full name?" "Lily Jenkins. Her age, she's 5. Jocelyn did a quick, almost imperceptible calculation in his head. His expression tightened further. 5 years. The same amount of time Eleanor had been gone. It was a coincidence. It had to be. He walked over to a small, silver-framed photograph on his desk. It was of a woman with a radiant smile, bright, intelligent eyes, and an easy grace. Eleanor Ashworth. He picked it up, his thumb stroking the glass. "I am going to have my head of security, a man named Marcus Thorne, look into you," he said, his back still to her. "It will be discreet. It will be thorough. If you are who you say you are, a widowed mother who has fallen on hard times, then you have nothing to fear. You will keep your job. In fact, I will arrange for you to be moved to a position here in the house, with accommodations provided. It will be easier for you and your daughter." Leilani's heart leapt with a confusing mix of relief and terror. A steady job, a place to live, security for Lily. It was everything she needed. But it came at the price of scrutiny, of having her fragile, fabricated life examined under a microscope. "And if he finds something else?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jocelyn turned around, his face grim. He placed the photograph back on the desk. "Then we will have another conversation." He looked at the door. "You may go. Report to Mrs. Gable in the morning. She will be given her new instructions." It was a dismissal. Leilani quickly stood, pulling Lily with her. She didn't say thank you. The word felt wrong. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, her life suddenly hijacked by a grieving billionaire's obsession with a song. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her one last time. "Ms. Jenkins." She turned. "For your daughter's sake," he said, his voice laced with a strange, almost pleading quality, "I hope you are telling me the truth." Leilani fled the room, her daughter in her arms, her heart a tangled mess of fear for the secrets she kept, and a terrifying, inexplicable premonition that Jocelyn Ashworth had just bound their lives together, for better or for worse. She didn't see Beatrice Vance watching from the end of the hallway. Her green eyes narrowed her mind, already plotting how to cut those threads before they could be woven into a tapestry she could not control. The following weeks were a dizzying paradox of security and dread. As promised, Jocelyn had installed Leilani and Lily in a clean two-bedroom apartment above the old carriage house. To 5-year-old Lily, it was a palace. She had manicured lawns to run on and gardens to explore her laughter, echoing in the open air a sound of pure, untroubled joy. For Leilani, it was a gilded cage. Every comfort was a bar, every kindness a lock. She performed her duties in the main house with quiet efficiency, polishing silver and arranging flowers, always aware that she was not an employee, but a specimen under observation. Jocelyn Ashworth was a constant, brooding presence. He rarely spoke to her beyond a curt nod, but she felt his gaze on her perpetually. It was not threatening, but something far more unsettling, analytical. He was a man trying to solve an impossible equation, and she and Lily were the unknown variables. His fixation on her daughter was particularly unnerving. He never approached Lily directly, but his interest manifested in strange, silent offerings. A beautifully illustrated book of classic fairy tales left on their doorstep. A small, handcrafted wooden bird placed on the stone bench where Lily liked to play. The most unsettling incident occurred one sunny afternoon. From her apartment window, Leilani saw Lily chasing butterflies across the vast lawn. Then she saw him. Jocelyn was standing half-hidden by the formidable trunk of an ancient oak tree, watching. He wasn't smiling, nor was he frowning. His expression was one of profound, agonizing longing, a look of such raw, naked hunger for a connection he could not bridge that it made Leilani's blood run cold. This was not the simple curiosity of a lonely man. It was an obsession, and she was terrified of its source. While Jocelyn's pressure was a quiet, ambient force, Beatrice Vance's was a direct and venomous assault. As Eleanor's sister and the director of the family foundation, Beatrice saw herself as the guardian of the Ashworth legacy, and she had immediately identified Leilani as a threat. She made it her mission to make Leilani's life unbearable. She would materialize to inspect Leilani's work, her sharp green eyes searching for flaws. Her comments, always delivered in a voice dripping with condescension, were designed to be overheard. It's remarkable what some people will do to improve their station in life, she remarked to Mrs. Gable one morning as Leilani dusted the family portraits. One has to wonder what sort of performance was required to earn such special treatment. Leilani weathered the attacks with a veneer of professional calm, but inside she felt the walls closing in. She knew this fragile peace was temporary. The true threat was not the resentful sister-in-law, but the polite, methodical man Jocelyn had hired to excavate her past. Marcus Thorne, head of Ashworth Security, finally came for her on a Tuesday. She had expected a gruff ex-cop. The man who approached her in the garden was quiet, academic, and impeccably dressed. His unassuming demeanor made him infinitely more dangerous. Miss Jenkins, he began with a disarming smile. Mr. Ashworth has asked me to finalize your employment details. A formality for our records. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Leilani replied, her heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. Just a few questions to verify your application, he said, opening a slim notebook. His eyes were kind, his voice even. You listed your late husband's name as David Jenkins. Yes, Leilani said, the lie feeling thin in the bright afternoon sun. And his place of employment, Miller and Swain, she recited the fictional name Tasting Like Ash, a small financial firm downtown. Thorne jotted it down without a flicker of expression. I see. And the police were never able to find the driver in his hit-and-run, a terrible business. No, they never did. Each word was a careful step on a crumbling ledge. Then came the final devastating question, delivered with the same placid professionalism. And lastly, I'll need a copy of Lily's birth certificate for our insurance and residency files. I can collect it from you this evening. Thank you for your time, Ms. Jenkins. It's a pleasure to have you with us. He smiled again and walked away, leaving Leilani rooted to the spot. The birth certificate, the one document that was both perfectly legal and a complete fabrication. It listed her as Leilani Jenkins and the father as David Jenkins. It was a legitimate paper that certified a lie. She could produce it, but she knew a man like Thorne wouldn't just file it away. He would cross-reference it. He would find no marriage license, no record of David Jenkins ever existing. He would unravel her. Panic, cold and absolute, began to set in. That night, she lay awake, staring at her sleeping daughter, wondering if they should flee. But where could they go? The gilded cage was still the only sanctuary she had. 2 weeks later, Marcus Thorne stood before Jocelyn Ashworth in the silent, mahogany-panelled study. The fire was unlit, and the room was cold. Report, Jocelyn, commanded his back to Thorne as he stared out the window at the darkening sky. It's a complex situation, Sir Thorne began, placing his leather briefcase on the desk and clicking it open. Then simplify it. Thorne took a breath. The simplification is this: Leilani Jenkins does not exist. Jocelyn turned slowly, his face like stone. Explain. There are no records for her of any kind, credit Social Security education, prior to 13 months ago. She materialized from thin air. The backstory she provided about her life and her husband is a complete fiction. There was no David Jenkins. There is no firm called Miller and Swain. A muscle worked in Jocelyn's jaw. Beatrice had been right. It was a grift, an elaborate, opportunistic scam. Who is she? This Thorne said, is where it becomes complex. He pulled a file from his briefcase. While Leilani Jenkins is a ghost, her fingerprints are not. We got a match from the Federal Academic and Employment databases. Her real name is Dr. Leilani Williams. Jocelyn stared, confused. The name meant nothing. Dr. Ph.D. in sociology from Columbia, a tenured professor specializing in corporate ethics. By all accounts, a brilliant academic. Then 13 months ago, she abruptly resigned, liquidated all her assets, and disappeared. The information was baffling. Why would a successful professor abandon her life to pose as a maid? It made no sense. Why, Jocelyn demanded. I believe the answer lies with her real husband, Thorne, said, sliding a photograph across the desk. It showed Leilani, her face brighter, happier, beside a kind-faced man. Dr. David Miller, a biochemist, one of the lead researchers at Sterling Finch Pharmaceuticals. The name of the rival company landed like a punch. David Miller died 13 months ago. Thorne continued, his voice grim. A single vehicle accident. Brake failure. Officially it was ruled an accident. Unofficially he had just filed an internal whistleblower report. He alleged that Sterling Finch was suppressing data on a new flagship drug, NX-47, a drug that was causing catastrophic side effects in trial participants. Thorne paused, letting the weight of the information settle before he delivered the killing blow. He slid a second document across the desk. It was a heavily redacted confidential medical file. The drug NX-47 was being tested in secret on a small number of subjects, with rare neurological conditions. One of those subjects was a 35-year-old woman. The drug didn't help her. It accelerated her decline, leading to a swift and fatal collapse of her nervous system. Jocelyn looked down at the paper, a sickening premonition washing over him. He already knew the name he would see. He read it anyway. Patient Eleanor Ashworth. The room spun. The air became thin, unbreathable. Eleanor. His Eleanor. Her death wasn't a tragedy. It was a data point. It was a crime scene. Leilani Williams hadn't just stumbled into his life. She had come here deliberately, carrying a truth about his wife's death that he had never even suspected. The con was infinitely deeper and more personal than he could have ever conceived. "There is one final piece," Sir Thorne said, quietly, his voice pulling Jocelyn back from the abyss. Lily's birth certificate. The one from her apartment was as expected a forgery. I acquired the authentic document filed under the name Leilani Williams. He pushed a last single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a copy of the official certificate of live birth. Jocelyn's eyes scanned the boxes. Mother Leilani Helen Williams, child Lily Mae Williams, and then the final box, the final impossible mystery. The father's name, Thorne stated, is listed as unknown. The cold fury that had gripped Jocelyn since Thorne's report was a palpable presence in the study. He didn't wait for a fire to be lit. The chilling atmosphere was enough. He summoned Leilani that night, letting her stand before the grand mahogany desk, where the files lay spread like an indictment. He let the silence stretch, watching her brace for the inevitable impact. When he finally spoke, he used a single, devastating projectile. Dr. Williams. The name struck her with physical force. Leilani flinched, her carefully constructed identity of Leilani Jenkins shattering into a million pieces. The color drained from her face, her shoulders slumping in utter defeat. There was no escape, no further lie to tell. How she whispered the fight gone from her voice. "I told you I would find out," Jocelyn said, his own voice, dangerously calm, a quiet prelude to a storm. "Now you will tell me everything. The real story. No more fiction about dead husbands who never existed. Tell me about Dr. David Miller. Tell me about Sterling Finch. And tell me precisely why you brought your lies into my home." The accusation of lies, while true, ignited a spark of her old fire. She was a liar, yes, but she was not a villain. Tears of grief and frustration welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, meeting his gaze with a strength he hadn't anticipated. "My husband David Miller was a good man," she began, her voice trembling, but gaining strength with every word. "He was a brilliant biochemist at Sterling Finch, and he believed his work could save lives. He was developing a new neurological drug, NX-47. The company was hailing it as a miracle." She told him everything then, the story pouring out of her in a torrent of pain and suppressed rage. She described how David had discovered that his boss, Alistair Finch, was systematically altering the trial data. The drug wasn't just failing in some patients, it was actively, aggressively killing them, causing a catastrophic systemic failure that mimicked other diseases, making it almost untraceable. David filed an internal whistleblower report. She continued, her hands clenching at her sides. He was naive. He believed the system would protect people. His superiors told him to be quiet. 2 weeks later, on his way to meet a journalist, his brakes failed. They called it an accident. She choked back a sob. "Alistair Finch murdered my husband to protect his company, to protect his future profits." Jocelyn listened, his face, a mask of stone, but inside a tempest was raging. Eleanor's death, once a tragic act of fate, was being recast as a cold-blooded killing. After he died, Leilani pressed on. "I found what he'd hidden for me. An encrypted drive with all the original data, every suppressed report, every patient file. Finch's men came for me. They broke into my apartment. They weren't looking for money. They wanted that drive. I knew I couldn't go to the police. Finch was too powerful. So I ran. I took a new name. I became a ghost. I had to become someone so insignificant that no one would ever look for me. And you chose to hide here, Jocelyn stated, connecting the pieces. Why, because of her, Leilani said, her gaze flicking to the silver-framed photo of Eleanor on his desk. Her name was in the files, Eleanor Ashworth. I knew her death had been high profile, attributed to a rare disease. But it wasn't. It was NX-47. I knew Alistair Finch had killed your wife too. I gambled that the last place he would ever search for the evidence was inside the home of his most prominent victim. The confession was horrific, compelling. It explained her presence, her lies, her constant hunted fear. It tied their tragedies together with a single bloody thread. But it failed to explain the two most personal, most haunting anomalies. The song Jocelyn pressed his voice, low and intense. If all this is true, explain the song. Eleanor's Lullaby. Leilani looked genuinely bewildered, her brow furrowing. I swear to you, I don't know for certain. I think I must have heard it somewhere years ago. A television special on your wife's philanthropy, perhaps? It must have buried itself in my subconscious. When Lily was born, it was just the tune I hummed to soothe her. I thought I had made it up. Her confusion seemed authentic, a bizarre but plausible coincidence. But it wasn't enough, and the child Jocelyn continued, his voice dropping further. He slid the final document across the polished wood, Lily's official birth certificate. David Miller died 13 months ago. Lily is 5 years old. The math is simple. He tapped the paper. The father is listed as unknown. Who is he, Leilani? Who is Lily's father? This was the last secret, the one she had guarded more fiercely than her own life. She sank into a leather chair, her strength finally deserting her. The story that came next was not one of corporate espionage or murder, but one of profound loneliness and desperation. After David was killed, my world ended. She whispered, staring at her hands. But I knew I had to survive. For him, I wanted a piece of the future we were supposed to have, a reason to keep fighting. But I was in hiding. I couldn't risk getting involved with anyone. She took a shaky breath, looking up to meet his searching eyes. I went to a fertility clinic, a very private, very anonymous one that deals with clients who demand absolute discretion. I used the last of my savings to pay for an anonymous donor insemination. Jocelyn remained perfectly still, waiting. They give you donor profiles, she explained, her gaze dropping again. No names or photos. Just information. Medical history, education, a personal statement. I read through dozens of them. I was looking for someone good, someone kind. She paused, gathering the courage to deliver the final, world-altering truth. And then I found him. Donor J87. The file said he was a businessman in his mid-30s. His hobbies were sailing, collecting rare books, and classical music. Every word was a hammer blow against the walls Jocelyn had built around his heart. In his personal statement, Leilani's voice trembled as she recited the words she had long since memorized. He wrote that he and his wife had always dreamed of having children, but had been unable to. He wrote that his wife had recently passed away after a long illness. Jocelyn staggered back, a hand flying to the desk to support himself. The room seemed to tilt on its axis, A memory buried under 5 years of sorrow and scotch erupted into his mind. A sterile room, a series of papers signed in a grief-stricken haze, a numb decision made from a vague, desperate impulse to ensure that some part of his and Eleanor's love might live on in the world even if he never knew it. Leilani looked at him, her eyes filled with dawning, impossible understanding. He wrote, "I am making this donation in her memory. It is my hope that I can give another family the gift that we were never able to receive." The air left Jocelyn's lungs. Donor J87, Jocelyn Ashworth. He stared at Leilani, the woman who had sought refuge in his home, the mother of his child. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a con. It was a staggering, terrifying, miraculous convergence of fate. Lily, his daughter, the inexplicable pull he felt towards her, the fierce, protective wave that washed over him when she was near. Her eyes. They weren't just like Eleanor's. They were his. The lullaby, a forgotten tune from a documentary, hummed by a mother to the daughter of the man who composed it. It was all a chain of devastating coincidence and unbelievable destiny. Alistair Finch hadn't just murdered his wife, he had set in motion the very events that brought Jocelyn's unknown orphaned daughter right to his door. The anger and grief that had defined Jocelyn for 5 years didn't vanish. They crystallized, honing into a single point of cold, diamond-hard rage. He looked at Dr. Leilani Williams, and saw her for the first time, not a liar, but a survivor. A fierce mother who had protected his child, his ally. He walked around the desk until he stood before her. He reached down and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, a promise. The chasm of suspicion between them was gone, replaced by a bridge of shared purpose. Alistair Finch. Jocelyn said, his voice no longer broken with grief, but sharp with intent. "He took my wife. He took your husband." He looked past her towards the window and the carriage house where his daughter slept. "He is going to pay for all of it." The Ashworth estate transformed. The mausoleum of grief became a war room, its silence replaced by the urgent murmur of strategy. The alliance between Jocelyn and Leilani, forged in shared tragedy and sealed by their love for Lily, was now a formidable weapon. With Marcus Thorne as their field marshal, they began the systematic takedown of Alistair Finch. The study became their command center. Here, Jocelyn's strategic mind, honed in the ruthless world of corporate warfare, found its perfect counterpart in Leilani's scientific acumen. He knew how to cripple a company. She knew how the crime had been committed. "A financial scandal isn't enough," Jocelyn stated, his voice edged with steel. "Finch would survive it. This needs to be criminal." Leilani, poring over the encrypted data from her late husband, provided the path. "It is criminal," she confirmed, her face illuminated by the glow of the laptop. She explained how the drug NX-47 didn't just fail, it actively created a unique protein cascade that attacked the nervous system, mimicking other disorders. "It's a perfect poison," she concluded grimly, "designed to be untraceable." David found the proof. While the plan against Finch took shape, the true transformation was happening within Jocelyn himself. He began having breakfast with Leilani, and Lily awkward and hesitant, at first a man relearning how to live. The breakthrough came not in a strategy session, but from a small 5-year-old girl. One morning, Lily walked up to him and presented a crayon drawing of a lopsided princess. "This is for you," she said, with the solemnity only a child can muster. "Because you look sad." Jocelyn stared at the drawing, his hand trembling as he took it. That simple act of childhood empathy, that pure, uncomplicated love, shattered the last of his icy reserve. The dam of grief didn't just crack. It washed away, leaving behind the aching, tender landscape of a father's heart. He was no longer just Lily's benefactor. He was becoming her father. He read her stories, showed her the stars, and saw in her curious mind a reflection of the best parts of himself. Confronted by Jocelyn with the devastating truth of her role in the cover-up, a broken Beatrice Vance confessed everything. The donation from Alistair Finch, the files she buried to protect the family name from a scandal. She hadn't understood it all came out in a torrent of guilt. Shamed but resolute, she provided the final nail for Finch's coffin, the irrefutable financial records proving the payment of hush money directly following Eleanor's death. The assault was swift and decisive. Marcus Thorne located Ben Carter, the journalist David Miller had died trying to reach. Now armed with Leilani's evidence and Jocelyn's protection, Carter was ready to tell the story. The result was a coordinated attack, a front-page exposé in the New York Times, a hostile takeover bid from Jocelyn that sent Sterling Finch stock into a nosedive, and an official SEC investigation fueled by Beatrice's leak. Alistair Finch was blindsided. He was arrested at dawn at his Connecticut estate, the charge not financial malpractice, but a shocking and undeniable count of manslaughter. The case of Eleanor Ashworth was officially reopened, the first of many to come. The war was over. 1 year later, the Starlight Gala was reborn. The grand ballroom, once a stage for Jocelyn's public grief, was now filled with genuine warmth and light. The foundation, co-chaired by Dr. Leilani Williams Ashworth, was thriving. Leilani stood beside Jocelyn, not in a uniform, but in a stunning gown, her hand resting comfortably in his. They had married 6 months earlier, their love a quiet, sturdy structure built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared devotion to their daughter. As the orchestra began to play a familiar, haunting melody, filled the air, Eleanor's lullaby. It was no longer a secret symphony of loss, but a published anthem of hope-funding research in her name. Jocelyn turned to Leilani, a real warm smile reaching his eyes for the first time in years. "May I have this dance?" "You may," she replied, her own smile radiant. They moved to the center of the floor, their steps perfectly in sync. They were not dancing with ghosts, but with a future they had built together from the ashes of their pasts. Watching from the sidelines was Lily, her eyes shining, her hand held securely by her Aunt Beatrice, who had found her own redemption in her love for her niece. When the song ended, Jocelyn and Leilani walked to their daughter. Jocelyn swung her up into his arms, holding her between them. The frozen king, his queen, and their princess, a family forged in tragedy, now standing whole in the light. The man who refused to dance was finally freely home. Jocelyn Ashworth's story is a powerful reminder that behind even the most impenetrable walls of grief, the human heart holds an infinite capacity for healing. It's a story about how secrets can destroy, but how the truth, no matter how painful, can ultimately set us free. The connection between Jocelyn, Leilani, and Lily was no mere coincidence. It was a complex tapestry woven by loss, fate, and the undeniable power of family, both the family we lose and the family we find in the most unexpected of places. It shows us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to face the past and the strength to dance again. If this story of love, loss, and redemption moved you, please let us know in the comments below. What part of their journey resonated with you the most? Don't forget to like this video. Share it with someone who appreciates a story with real heart, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that explore the depths of the human experience. Thank you for watching.